All right, welcome along to the RT Soccer Podcast. Raf Diallo here, and we're straight into the international break and the start of the Euro 2024 qualifier campaign. Latvia are first up in a friendly on Wednesday for Stephen Kenny's side, and then the big one against France next Monday. We'll have live coverage of both games on RT2 and the RTE player, and there will also be radio coverage on RT Radio 1 Extra and 2FM's Game On, respectively, for both of those games, as well as a live blog on rte.ie/sport. We're going to bring you an insight on France with French football journalist Philippe Auclair a little bit later on, and we'll talk about the latest League of Ireland action and the Champions League draw with Graham Gartland. But first, I'm joined today by former Ireland, Sunderland, Man City and Wolves striker Stephen Elliott. How are you?
How's it going, Raf?
Yeah, not too bad. Before we get your thoughts on the squad, the Latvia game and also the France one, let's listen to Stephen Kenny. He was speaking to Tony O'Donoghue recently about Mikey Johnston and also the Irish attack.
Talk to me about Mikey Johnston. His FIFA clearance has come through, and it's a player that I think you're excited about his potential. Will he get a game against Latvia at least?
We'll have to see. I think Mikey is a natural talent, a natural dribbler who can go inside or outside, right-footed player playing on the left, and has all-round qualities. Obviously, he's played in 4 Scottish Cup finals for Celtic by the time he was 22, so he's done a lot, but he's been out injured for a year and he's come back this year, which is tough for a young player, and he's come back and playing a good league in Portugal. They're challenging for a European place, so that's a different experience for him. So it's his introduction, first time in the squad, so we'll have to wait and see.
I think people are very excited about Evan Ferguson, only 18 years of age, playing regularly and scoring in a very, very high quality league. Is it too early for him against the World Cup finalists?
I think the profile of the strikers we have now compared to what we had, say, even 2 years ago is completely different. All of a sudden now we've got a lot of pace, and in our forward line, Chidozie Ogbenya has emerged, Michael Obafemi, Evan Ferguson, Adam Ida, although we're not sure he'll be fit, Troy Parrott, and now even Mikey Johnston. All of these players, individual talent with speed, and give us good options going into the games, and good options off the bench, which we will need, and that's important.
All right, so that is Republic of Ireland manager Stephen Kenny speaking to Tony O'Donoghue, RT soccer correspondent, last week after naming the squad. And of course, Mikey Johnston, the first person who's spoken about there, who would have come through at Celtic, a winger, and who's currently on loan at Vitoria Guimarães. Stephen, how much have you seen of him, and what do you make of him? I mean, I was speaking to Graham Gartland recently about him, and he was telling me he sort of, because there's a lot of comparisons with Aidan McGeady because of where he's come from, but the fact is he's more direct, but maybe less skillful in terms of dribbling.
Yeah, I think he's a good option, obviously, for Stephen, since he's come into the since he's been available for the Irish selection. I haven't seen loads of him this year, I'll be honest, out in Portugal, but by all accounts he's doing quite well out there after having a disappointing time or injury. But like Stephen alluded to there, he has a fair bit of experience with Celtic before his injury, playing in some big high-profile games, and he's a good option for Stephen. He's a dribbler, like you mentioned. From what I remember seeing him at Celtic, he's quite sharp and he's direct, and he'll bring something a little bit different into the squad. Whether we'll see him, we may see him in the Latvia game. I would presume if we are going to see him, we'll probably see him in that first and foremost. Whether he'll start the game will be up to Stephen, but he's another option, and he's somebody that has come back, and he'll have that little bit of hunger, no doubt, in him after being out for so long. And yeah, again, the Portuguese league, it might be a little bit different to what's played in the British leagues, kind of tempo of the games, but it's some big clubs playing out there, and he's up against some good players. So it'll be interesting to see how he kind of gels in the group. Obviously, you're always going to get the comparisons with Aidan being obviously from Glasgow and Irish and that, but if he can be anywhere, if he can be half as good as what Aidan McGeady was during his time for Ireland, then he'd be doing okay.
Yeah, and then in regards to Evan Ferguson, I think we can dispense with any talk of him starting or not. He's going to start, and I mean, and I'd say in both games as well, just to get him up to speed, because he's obviously relatively new to the Ireland squad, just 2 caps in November, but 2 great goals at the weekend, especially the first one against Grimsby in the FA Cup. Now, I think the question, I'd be interested to get your thoughts as a fellow striker. Who do you start with him? I mean, Evan has his qualities, but also how do you complement that, or what's the best to, I suppose, get the best out of him, but also maybe offer a contrast?
Yeah, it all depends on what way kind of Stephen Kenny looks at it, whether he wants to put somebody right up there alongside him. It's a difficult one. He's got some players to choose from. Obviously, Ogben, he's done quite well at Rotherham. He's done okay for Ireland when he's played. Troy Parrott's just kind of come back from injury. I don't know whether he'll kind of into the reckoning. But he could go kind of 3 forwards, kind of narrow 3 forwards. It depends on what Stephen's thinking. But whoever he goes with, definitely Ferguson's the number 1 choice. I think he'd be a great outlet for any of the lads there mentioned. I know Adam Ida's kind of pulled out of the squad, so that'll be a little bit disappointing for Stephen to lose somebody like that. But Obafemi as well, does he come in? He's playing he's in a squad that are kind of fine. He took a bit of a beating at City in the FA Cup, but he's in a squad that are playing right at the top of the championship. So he has options up there, but it all depends on what way he wants to go. Whether he might try a different formation out against Latvia, like you say. I think he will play Ferguson kind of to gel him into the squad. But for regarding Ferguson, somebody so young, he just looks like he's been around for years and years the way he plays. Obviously, he got some great goals there the weekend in the FA Cup, like the composure he shows from one so young. So I'm probably looking at, if you're going to play somebody up alongside somebody with a bit of pace, so I'd be thinking maybe Ogbenny or Obafemi. I think they'd be a good kind of outlet off him to kind of run off him, and because I think Ferguson can play that kind of target man. He can do a little bit more than that, obviously, as we've seen, but I think he can play that role as well, where players can kind of run off the shoulder of him and see how he links up. But no, it's exciting. It's exciting to have somebody so talented and doing so well in the top league, and it makes people in Ireland. Everybody keeps saying you don't want to get too carried away, but it's very hard not to after kind of what we've experienced kind of in them front areas over the past 5, 6, 7 years since obviously Robbie Keane has retired.
And in your own experience, when in the times where you would have played in a 2, did you prefer to have a strike partner who was kind of different in terms of their attributes to you, or did it really matter? If it was somebody maybe like a target man that you could play off, maybe.
It depends. Obviously, it didn't really bother me as much when I played. Obviously, when I kind of broke into first team football, most of the teams were kind of playing 2 up front, and the kind of likelihood was you played with a big lad. Played with Kevin Coyle for a bit, who was quite tall and kind of direct, 6'3". I've also played with Marcus Stewart, who was somebody that was a little bit similar kind of player to myself. So I think as long as you recognise who you're playing up front with, and you can kind of build up a bit of kind of togetherness with him, and you learn the movements, it doesn't really matter. And again, that'll be something that Stephen will be. I'm sure he's been thinking about this for weeks, months, probably with this game in mind and who he's going to play. I think after Evan Ferguson broke into the Brighton team starting well, he probably had a fair inkling that he was kind of probably going to be his go-to man. So I'm sure Stephen has given this a lot of thought over the past few months, whether who he wants to go with. But again, as long as somebody's got a good football brain and they can kind of adapt well to whoever they're playing alongside, I don't think it really matters whether it's somebody big or small. As long as they understand that the way Stephen is setting the team up to play, they can adjust to that, and that's the main thing.
Yeah, and then at the other end, obviously Ireland, when we're talking about the France game, it's going to be Mbappe that needs to be stopped, which is, I think, pretty much, there were loads of teams in the World Cup who struggled to do that, and loads of clubs have also struggled to pin him down. So from an Irish point of view, they'll obviously be playing the back 3 with wing backs. So when you're looking at a striker and a sort of one-off like him with as much pace as he has and incision, are you trying to just focusing on blocking the supply lines, or do you have to just double up on him, or is it sort of a bit of both?
I don't know. I was just wondering whether there was a prison cell or something in the new Amiga where we could lock him up before the game and then let him out when the game is over. But no, listen, I think we just have to limit kind of how he can kind of hurt us. As you said, that's easier said than done, because we've seen him against the best teams in the world during the World Cup, and he was able to kind of turn around at any given moment. So it's one of them. We just kind of have to hopefully hope that he has a bit of an off day, and whoever Stephen decides to go at the back can kind of stop him being as effective for France as he possibly can. And we got to hope that he doesn't just kind of get the run of the Lansdowne Road pitch, because where he's like, if he's given space to run into, he's very, very hard to stop. But I think we just need to concentrate on how we can cause problems for France as well, because listen, you got to take it that France are going to have a lot of the attacking play in the game. That's just the way they are. They got to the World Cup final. They're probably one of the best teams in the world, if not the best. I know they lost the World Cup final, but that was obviously down to one man, Messi. I just think we need to see, can we affect the game offensively, and hopefully our boys at the back can kind of nullify him as much as possible.
And in the one thing I think that's often been said as well, we tend to, I suppose as a football nation, we tend to actually turn up in these sort of games. Like, there have been exceptions, like I remember the Germany 6-1 a few years ago, or the Denmark 5-1, mitigating circumstances in both of those games. But we have a tendency as a football nation to turn up and are very hard to beat in it. So does that give you a little bit of hope that in that France game that Ireland will be able to I suppose rise to the occasion, and even if it is a defeat, it won't be as as yawning a gap as some people might expect?
Yeah, definitely. I think the crowd can be a massive factor in the game, because listen, nobody expects Ireland to win this game. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're always in with a chance in a game of football, but I don't think anybody in football will be looking at this fixture and seeing anything other than a France win. So the Irish players have got to use that as an advantage, to kind of use it as a way to prove the football world wrong. And again, we talk about Mbappe. They've got good players all over the pitch. They've got players playing at the Champions, at the high ends of the Champions League, the late rounds, the top quality players. So we can't just focus on Mbappe. Obviously, he's the draw, he's the main player, but we've got a lot of other players to be worried about as well in that French team, and we just need to make sure that we're set up well. Every player that's picked to play on the evening knows their role, and hopefully the crowd can get right behind the team, and we can have one of those historical nights, because again, it's the first game in the group. It can either kind of make us or break us. Listen, if we lose the game, it's not a disaster, but I do think the performance is important, and we can kind of go out there and put a good showing on, and who knows, if we can get something from the game, then what a confidence boost that will be going forward in the group.
Yeah, and from your own experience, I think around 2005 and 6, you would have been in squads and also played in some of the games against France, Germany, Italy, and they were close games in the end. I think Ireland lost only by a goal in each one of those, and they're the three of the leading nations at the time. How did you prepare for those type of opponents? I mean, was the focus like you're saying with the France game, there needs to be a focus on what Ireland can do to hurt them as well, not just be totally obsessed with Mbappe and everything else. But at that time, and it would have been around the time that Brian Kerr would have been involved, and then Staunton, how much focus was there on stopping them, and was there also that other thing of we can actually do something as well from our side?
Yeah, definitely. I remember the France game back then. I think they beat us 1-0, free kick, if I remember correctly.
Zidane,
yeah. I think it was one of them where you kind of, in preparation for the game all week, we as a squad, we kind of tried to set up and try and work on ways that we can stop them being as effective. I think we're going back at that French squad. They had some really kind of top players, but we had a good team. We had a really good, strong kind of core group playing at the top ends of the Premier League back then. So we felt like we, as a squad, like there was players there, like obviously Robbie Keane, Damien Duff, players that were really able to kind of put up against anybody in world football at that stage. So we always felt like we had threats if we could kind of be organised and stay in the game, which we did. We never really took any kind of batterings, but obviously, like you said there, it's still a defeat at the end of the day, but there's a manner of losing games, rather than kind of going out and losing 4s and 5s. If you can kind of stay in the game, you can get the crowd on side, and you just never know. We'll go back even a little before that when Jason McAteer scored that goal against Holland, like we all remember where we were watching that game, and it's the Portugal game as well around that time. These are big games where you just never know, and you got to cling on to that belief. It's more of a belief than anything, but ultimately Stephen Kenny and the players have a chance to kind of to do something about that belief that the Irish public will have. They can try and get as organised as possibly, try and put a game plan in place wherever. The beauty is he has this kind of week and a bit beforehand to try and put a plan in place, because it's very hard for international managers to kind of get their ideas across when they have players for 3 or 4 days, especially when they come in drips and drabs, with some players playing on the Saturday, some playing on the Sunday. So at least now Stephen will have a full week or so, a little bit longer than a week, with the team to decide what way he wants to go about. I say stopping France, but that ultimately what the aim will be, stopping their kind of threats and hopefully have a little bit of a game plan where we can affect them in the other parts of the pitch. Which, listen, we've got, like Stephen mentioned, we have pace up top. We've got a player playing in the Premier League that's scoring goals. So we do have threats of our own, but it's just keeping the door shut, to stay in the game, and you just never know, Raf.
Yeah, and then the Latvia game, which is it's going to be a few days before the France game. Do you, from your point of view, do you think the wisest thing is actually to kind of field almost the team that is going to start against France, and then you can make a good few substitutions as the game wears on then?
I think so, yeah. I think because you got to look at even defensive areas there. You look at Nathan Collins, and again, he hasn't played really regularly for Wolves in recent times. I think he's only played about 90 odd minutes since January, which isn't a lot of football. And I know Steve has always said that you need to be playing club football to be getting in the team, but it might be a good occasion to get players. Obviously, Matt Doherty, if he's going to be starting, he hasn't played loads for Atletico Madrid since he's gone out to Spain. So it might be a time to kind of get minutes in players' legs. Evan Ferguson, do you want to give him that international experience before the big game against France? But I'm sure, like, again, you can make changes in these games. I'm sure you want to get a look at as many players as possible without disrespecting the kind of game and the international fixture. But no, it's obviously everybody. We got the Latvia game, but in the back of everybody's heads will be the French game. It'll be the big one. But it's a chance for Stephen to work on kind of a style of play. I would expect Ireland to have a little bit more of the ball against Latvia, no matter what kind of team he puts out regarding in comparison to what the French game will be like. But listen, it's a chance to build up some confidence, build up a bit of cohesiveness. We're in the team, so I don't think it'd be a bad idea to kind of try and go with as similar kind of enough 11 to what you're going to go with in the France game. So it just builds up that feeling around the team, and everybody knows where they need to be. So yeah, although it's not massively important result wise, I think it'll be very interesting to see what Stephen does in the Latvia game and how the lads perform.
Yeah, and a final point before I let you go. So the Arsenal Crystal Palace game yesterday, Paddy McCarthy got the opportunity to step up as a caretaker manager. Now, looking back through his career, he would have come through at Man City, and at around the same time as yourself. Would you have known him quite well? And I mean, was he somebody even now? And this is a very long time ago. So when we're talking about, like, can you see somebody being a manager? It's probably not a realistic question at the time. But like, in terms of his qualities, are there things that you would have seen then that you thought, okay, maybe 20 years down the line, there's potential. There's somebody who's interested in the game in a certain way.
No, well, listen, it was great to see Paddy yesterday. Obviously, we spent 4 or 5 years together, myself, Paddy, Glenn Whelan, Willow Flood, Stephen Paisley. There was a right core group of Irish lads, Brian Murphy as well, from Waterford, who came over to City at the same time, and we kind of grew up together and became men together. And it was great to see Paddy on the side there for taking Crystal Palace game. Obviously, the result didn't go well, but I felt Crystal Palace did okay in the game. He looked organised and he carried a goal threat. But regarding your question, did I see Paddy as a manager? One thing about Paddy was he was a winner and he was a leader, and he led by example. He kind of, again, going back a long time here. Was he at the time? Was he like somebody that you'd think, yeah, he's going to be a manager and a coach? I'm not sure. Maybe he did have that kind of drive about him where you kind of looked to him. He was more often than not our captain, both in the younger international age groups and in the U team at City. So he always had that kind of leadership quality about him. And I'm not massively surprised to see him on the side. He's worked really hard. He's obviously had a few downs in his playing career. He's had to stop playing early, and he's regrouped, and he's got his coaching badges together, and he's worked hard all through the Crystal Palace Academy. I think he's been at the club for 14, 15 years as a whole, including his playing career. So he deserved that opportunity on Saturday. And I'd love to see him kind of stay in the job from now till the end of the season. As I said, he's got a great affiliation with the football club. He understands how it ticks. And again, I know the talk of bringing Roy Hodgson in, which I'm sure I can see the arguments for that. Steady hand, knows the club really well, very passionate about the club. But if you're going to look at somebody a bit different, then why not Paddy? He knows all the young lads as well, all the good players. He would have worked with them for the last 2, 3, 4 years. And again, Crystal Palace have great history of bringing young players through into the first team. So again, if you're thinking about something outside the box, then I'd love to see Paddy kind of stay in the job there. I think he carried himself really well, both in the kind of match interviews and the pre-match interviews and the post-match interviews. And I'm sure he's kind of sitting at home over the international weekend. I'm sure he's going to discuss with the board at Palace whether he's going to stay in charge for a bit longer, whether they're going to bring somebody else in. But whether he does get the job now or not, I do think he's going to be a manager and a very good manager at that, because again, he's learned the game well over the years, and he is a proper leader, and I wish him all the best. All
right, good stuff. Anyway, now it's time to get an insight on France with football journalist Philippe Auclair, whose work in a range of publications speaks for itself and who's very familiar with our own country. But before we do that, Stephen Elliott, thanks for taking the time, and best of luck.
Cheers, Raf. Take care, mate.
It's a pleasure to be joined by football journalist Philippe Auclair as we look to get a valuable insight into the French team ahead of the Euro 2024 qualifier on 27th March at the Aviva Stadium. Obviously, Ireland being the French's opposition. And Philippe, thanks a million for taking the time to chat to us on the podcast. Obviously, obviously the last time everyone saw France was not so long ago. It was December's World Cup final. What was a classic match against Argentina. Obviously, they just fell short on penalties, but there was a lot of scrutiny on Deschamps and the French team going into the tournament. What do you feel that World Cup run has actually done for his reputation, but also that of the squad, and how they're perceived by the French public?
I would say that perhaps as a national team manager, this was probably his highest achievement. It was certainly a very, very tough ask. We got to remember how things were shaping up before the tournament, where there were at one point 13 players who were injured. And I mean 13 genuine contenders for a place in the 2025 or 26. And in fact, France was so bereft of players that they didn't go to Qatar with a full contingent. And we're talking about really important players who were doubtful or couldn't make it, or were doubtful or played on one leg, as we say in French, for the tournament. And doing what they did was probably exceeding people's expectations. Many people were thinking, and I include myself in that even the group phase would prove quite tricky for the French. But the way they managed to find means to go past their opponents, sometimes playing some absolutely beautiful football, and that final, and the way they reacted despite not being there for the first hour. Certainly, when the tournament finished, it was sure that Didier Deschamps would stay in place if he wanted to. He had achieved his objective, which was a place in the semi-finals. And B, I think his stature as a national team manager was heightened by that tournament, because who were the main architects of the victory in 2018, apart from Kylian Mbappe, of course, and Antoine Griezmann, but two players called Paul Pogba and N'Golo Kante, neither of whom was in Qatar. And to manage to reshape the team without those two really important players was something I think many people simply admired. And also there were choices that surprised, I think, most observers. The reinvention of Antoine Griezmann as a kind of deep line playmaker, and the way in which Griezmann flourished in that role was probably something that people were not expecting. Didier Deschamps was supposed to be quite an unimaginative manager, coach, tactician, and so forth. There he surprised us. He found a solution to a genuine problem. So when the World Cup finished, I would say that the way that Deschamps was rated, not just with the French FA, not just with people who were analyzing the game, but with the French public at large, I think was as high as it's ever been.
Yeah.
But now, just as he had to face a difficult challenge and a genuine challenge before the World Cup in Qatar, he has to face another one, because the team that we're going to see from now on is not the team that went to the final in Doha.
Okay. Before we get onto the squad, also his position, obviously he's been in charge for 11 years up to this point, but he extended his contract in January, which will take him to 2026, which is going to be a remarkably long tenure. But interestingly, in the background with the French Football Federation, Noël Le Graët, who was appointed as the president of the FFF just a year before Deschamps took charge and has overlapped with him, has resigned just last month. Now, does that weaken Deschamps' position? I mean, was there sort of an alliance there between them, given that they overlapped for so long?
I think there was I wouldn't say an alliance as such. As I think there was an understanding, and I think Noël Le Graët in many ways was piggybacking on the success of Didier Deschamps' team. Le Graët, as he said, has left. He will probably take on a position as head of the FIFA office in Paris, which is causing some controversy. I'll put it that way. To put it mildly, I would say, in France. But there is nothing really that Deschamps has done which taints him by association. It was an alliance of interest. It was the way it was, and Deschamps is a very good diplomat. He's not somebody who wears his heart on his sleeve. He's always very prudent in his pronouncements. He's very cautious, always has been. Tends to have, we talk about him very often as a tap, which when you open is only lukewarm water coming out of it. neither icy nor burning hot, which is enough. So he carries on. And he never, I think, put himself in a situation where he could be seen to be ingratiated and have a debt towards the old regime. So I don't think he's affected by what's happening in the French Football Federation, the FFF. Just the same way that if I take an example in rugby, Fabien Galtier is not really affected by what's happened with Bernard Laporte. So he's been untouched by the controversy so far. And so things carry on as per usual. As you know, it's true that it's quite extraordinary to think that he took over in 2012. That's a long time. And the way it's going, he could challenge, I think, for the longest reign of a French national team manager, which is quite extraordinary in this day and age. But it's a measure of his success. It's the measure of his understanding of what makes the French team work. And even people who have a lot to say about the kind of football that he promotes, and I include myself in those, will have to simply accept, if albeit begrudgingly, that at the moment, he certainly is the man for the position.
Yeah, and as for the squad itself, so the retirements include Hugo Lloris, of course, the World Cup winning goalkeeper, Raphael Varane, and Karim Benzema, who wasn't always part of the picture during Deschamps' reign, and also for reasons not related to football either. Interestingly,
no, not really,
well.
no.
But you know, what you said earlier was kind of interesting, because I would have thought with the depth that France have, and it's probably the envy of every country in the world, certainly of Ireland anyway, given where we currently are. I would have thought it was a situation of sort of more of the same over the next cycle in this group. But you're sort of suggesting that it's maybe tactically it might be the same, but a lot of personalities have gone out of this squad.
Yeah, and very important personalities. I mean, Hugo Lloris was an absolute, it was a magnificent servant of the French national team. I know people have criticized him for some of his performances, but in the dressing room, as a symbol of that team, he's been absolutely stupendous. And I think he's actually been stupendous on the field, actually, many times, as he was during the World Cup, by the way. Raphael Varane is one that we're going to miss an awful lot. Pure class, pure elegance, football intelligence. Still very, very young, but unfortunately too fragile a body, perhaps, to be able to bear the demands of being a starter with Manchester United and a starter with the French national team. But he will be greatly missed. And the other thing, don't forget Steve Mandanda, who was Hugo Lloris number 2 for a long time, who was also one of the rocks of Didier Deschamps' tenure. And as to Karim Benzema, of course, he was out in the wilderness for quite a while after the situation created by the famous Valbuena, or infamous, I should say, Valbuena video incident. People can read about it. But when he came back, he was superb. And even, when you think about the complete and utter shambles that was Euro 2020 for France and the way France went out to Switzerland, he was superb in that tournament. And the fact that he was not available for the World Cup was one of the 2022, that is one of the many things that made people think before the tournament, we're not going to go anywhere. And the way in which actually this is ending, Karim Benzema's relationship with Les Bleus leaves a little bit of a bitter taste, because there are now people, and there are now doubts about the fact that his health or his physical condition were not good enough to enable him to play in Qatar, and maybe actually, he could have gone. And so that leaves a bitter taste in the mouth. So we're talking about 4 very, very big players, and which you don't replace like this from one day to the next. If I look at and actually when you listen to Didier Deschamps' press conference after he announced his list, he very much explained that this was a work in progress, and that what we saw now was not necessarily what we would be seeing in 2 months' time in terms of the players who had been chosen. And I'm thinking of the keepers, for example, Alfonso Areola, Mike Maignan, Brice Samba. Brice Samba, I think, is somebody whom you'd like to to try out, like he would like to try at Alban Lafont as well at some point in the near future. But these are very big boots to fill. Who to go with in terms of a central defensive pairing, knowing that Presnel Kimpembe, of course, is still injured. You see Wesley Fofana coming in. Well, have a look at the season that Wesley Fofana has had with Chelsea. Basically, he hasn't had a season. And also, he doesn't play in the same system. He plays in the three at the back, not the four at the back, like Deschamps has always, or nearly always, chosen to field. You carry on. I mean, you're thinking, okay, William Saliba, maybe, okay, finally. Saliba, whom he didn't really trust beforehand. I think the last time Saliba played for the French, he was hooked after 45 minutes. Okay, Dayot Upamecano, wonderful player, we know that, but somewhat inconsistent. I mean, when you look at it, you look at the back, and I'm probably giving you reasons to hope for Ireland here. I'm not seeing a settled back four. And it's probably the way, I mean, we will obviously we'll see what he does against the Netherlands, but normally it's 4-3-3 or a variation of. And I can't really see how it's going to work. And the thing as well, Eduardo Cavaminga, who's a player I absolutely love, is going to be selected as a left back.
Yeah, strange.
It's beyond strange. I think Eduardo Cavaminga can become one of the truly great midfielders of the next 10 years, but it would be nice if he were to be played in his actual position. I'm sure he can do a great job as left back, and actually, in fact, he has done that on several occasions in the past, but that's not where he can really radiate, because he can do that. He can be one of those players, a bit like a Jude Bellingham, who has this presence all over the field. He's both destructive and creative, and has a fantastic reading of the game. Well, that's not exactly what you ask from a left back, is it? So, and you carry on, and you look at the midfield, and I'm not totally convinced by that midfield. Like Chouameni is fantastic, absolutely love him to bits, but why not put him with Cavaminga? And also, he's short of competition. Then we've got Jordan Verretou. No offense to Jordan, but honestly, he's not that kind of level. I don't think that anybody would disagree with me. Kefren Turam has had a great season with OGC Nice, but he's also untested at this level. It might be his first cap or his second cap. Adrien Rabiot, well, is what he is, and has shown signs that he was improving at the World Cup and might be actually the fulcrum of that midfield. But it's still very much a moving feast, isn't it? And the only place where I think that, okay, yes, France is terrifying is an attack, because yes, there is an awful lot of potential there, and it doesn't just stop at Kylian Mbappe and Antoine Griezmann. The others who are behind, I mean, Kolo Muani showed at the World Cup what he can do. I think Marcus Thuram is still, I mean, he's also great talent. Kingsley Coman is a beautiful player. Olivier Giroud is still there.
Yeah, because I wanted to ask you about him, because I was surprised, he's 36. I would have thought he's already got a World Cup winners medal. He's just broken the France goal scoring record during the tournament. What else was there to achieve as an international forward? And yet I kind of see, maybe not logic from Giroud's point of view, but from Deschamps' point of view, Giroud and Mbappe seem to suit each other on the pitch. Maybe I don't know what their relationship is like. It seems a little bit cordial rather than close in the way that Benzema and Mbappe sort of got on a friendship level. However, it seemed on the pitch, Giroud gets the best out of Mbappe. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, completely, because he's the focal point. He's the controlling tower, as we say in French, the tour de control, who can be used, and he's very good playing in first touch as well, and deviating the ball, and which with players who are as imaginative and as Antoine Griezmann and Kylian Mbappe is perfect. As far as Giroud is concerned, in his mind, he wants to carry on as long as he can at the highest level. That's always, you're talking about a young 36-year-old player. That's the thing, there are some very old 30 years old, like Wayne Rooney was very old when he was 30, because he'd been playing non-stop since he was 16 and a half, basically. Olivier Giroud, just like Didier Drogba, is somebody who only started to play at the very highest level when he was 24, 25. Before that, he was playing in the lower divisions, lower leagues. And he only came out of the amateur ranks quite late compared to other players. So he's had 10, 11 years at the top. That's not an awful lot, especially for a player of his kind who doesn't really rely on his speed. I mean, he's never been the quickest, has he? But he relies on again, his intelligence, his prowess in the air, his physicality, and this beautifully delicate touch that he has when he receives the ball and, can caress it with the outside of his foot, whichever direction he wants the ball to take. So he's quite a young, 36-year-old. So it's not exactly that surprising. And given his record as well, I mean, what did he do in the World Cup that would convince you that he should stop playing international football? Absolutely nothing. Actually, in fact, quite the opposite thing. He's still got a lot to give, even if it's as a plan B, which he has often been. So to me, there's no surprise. And also Deschamps, having lost so many players of great experience on whom he knew he could rely, he doesn't want to lose yet another one. And you look through the team and you're thinking, there aren't that many players in there who have had a place in the French team, a settled place in the French team for a long time. I would say Antoine Griezmann is definitely one of them, who I think in terms of his contribution to the French national team, I think only Kylian Mbappe and Giroud in his own way can compare in terms of what he's brought. I think there's actually a case to be made to say that Antoine Griezmann is probably the outstanding French player of the last 10 years with the national team. So he's got that. He's got Giroud, and that's about it. Kylian Mbappe is Kylian Mbappe is this extraordinary player, but who is not, genuinely a leader, be it in the dressing room or on the field of play. But on the other hand, he's the guy that makes things happen and becomes a leader by what he can achieve on the pitch, which is what he did against Argentina and against many other opponents. So it made complete sense for Deschamps to carry on relying on a player like Olivier Giroud.
And interestingly, you say Mbappe's leadership credentials there are a little bit under question, because I was reading beforehand that there's actually talk, and Deschamps has been talking him up as a potential captain. And I don't know whether this is a definite thing that we're going to see against the Netherlands and Ireland, but is there that speculation that Mbappe, in a way maybe that Messi was made captain of Argentina or Ronaldo of Portugal, that the star player is sort of made captain? And I don't know, maybe it's, if you follow English football a lot, the idea of what a captain is supposed to be is overblown more than here in Ireland or in France or wherever. But I don't know, what do you think?
Absolutely. I think that the captain's role in France is just not the same as it is in other countries. If you think about Ireland, you think about England, even if you think about Italy, I would think like Fabio Cannavaro, for example, for the 2006 World Cup winning team. Yes, of course, it's an important role, but it is not weighted with the same expectations, perhaps, as it is elsewhere. And then if you think about the way Mbappe goes about his business, in a way, making him captain is not necessarily seeing in him the qualities that make a great captain. Is perhaps more of a tool to push him a little bit further, to see if he can give something extra. If perhaps wearing the armband, which he will be very proud to wear, is perhaps encouraging him to contribute more to the team, which he can certainly do at times, certainly defensively, because he contributes almost nothing. Let's be fair about that. So maybe it's a case of telling Kylian, it's your team, and you lead it from the front, sometimes for your own performances, but you can go beyond that. And I wouldn't go much further than this as far as the captain's role is concerned. I mean, there have been some iconic captains of the French national team. Michel Platini definitely has been one of them. You could say that Zidane has been one, even though in terms of personality, he was not what you would think of as captain material.
Deschamps himself probably.
Deschamps is a proper and was a proper captain. Deschamps has been a captain throughout all his life in every single team that he's played in. I think he was captain of FC Nantes when he was 19 years of age. And the team of which he was the captain had some established internationals there, but he had immediately been identified as captain material. I don't think that's necessarily something that people would say of Kylian Mbappe, for example.
Yeah, and of course, Paul Pogba won't be involved in this particular international break. So
Yeah.
he's one player Ireland aren't going to worry about. But again, at the same time, they got to a World Cup final without him, and as talented as he is. But I'd be interested to get your perspective on him, because there's a reputation he has in the Premier League of being someone who flatters to deceive. Yet I get the impression maybe he's more appreciated, certainly in Italy up to maybe recently, and certainly in France, given what he was involved in 2018.
I think with France, apart from this awful game he had against Switzerland in the Euro, which is probably something that has changed some of the part of his image, perhaps with the French public. He's always been superb with France. He's always given with France what people have been expecting from him at club level, and got when he was at Juve, certainly before he came back to Manchester United, he was superb. But then since then, to be honest, he's more or less disappeared. And the biggest problem, people talk about his attitude on the pitch and so forth. For me, the biggest problem is not that. The problem is his body. The problem is that this player is never fit. And every time he gets back to full fitness, he gets injured again. And that is coming to an age when you're thinking, we've got to think that the great Paul Pogba that we all hoped to see at one point, we'll never see him. We will not. Because there will always be a problem. There was talk in France at one stage, even up to a few days ago, that because he's back after a fashion playing, when he's on time for training sessions, that is, he could have a chance to get back in the group. Deschamps really likes him, and Paul Pogba loves playing with Le Bleu. I think you can see it actually when he puts that shirt on. But that's not the case. I wouldn't necessarily think that it's going to be the case for a long time. Similarly, N'Golo Kante is very close to coming back. He could be playing for, to be honest, I'm saying that, but it is being broadcast later. So I've got to be very careful. N'Golo Kante is back with Chelsea, back in training. And N'Golo Kante, who is anywhere near the level he was at 2018, is a given starter in the French national team. So, which is why I'm saying this is an odd moment. It's a moment of transition. We knew it was going to be because some players were retiring. We knew because of the timing as well when this international window is happening, and also because there are quite a lot of players who will come back, and therefore will question, the status quo at the moment. I mean, what we see, that list, I think, will be very, very different when the next international window comes.
Yeah, and in regards to the group, of course, it's Ireland, it's France, Netherlands, Greece, Gibraltar. Obviously, the Dutch are the first on the 24th of March before the French come to Dublin on Monday of the following week. And just in regards to how it's being perceived, I mean, would I be right in imagining that all the focus is on this Dutch game in terms of the interest levels from the public, and that Ireland is something of an afterthought because we're not as well known in terms of our players as we were maybe in previous times?
Say that, but there's a great deal of history between the two sides, isn't there?
Yeah, there's a little hand, I think, needs to be mentioned.
Yeah, well, there's more than that. I mean, it goes back a long time. I mean, I'm older than you are, but with Ireland, there's been a few things in the past, and a few forgettable and a few unforgettable games. And sometimes it depends which point of view you speak from to decide whether they're forgettable or unforgettable. I would say that the focus at the moment is very much on the Dutch game, and that it's one match at a time, literally, in terms of the media attention. People are not projecting themselves on the Irish game at all. I think it's more a question of we're going to meet a Dutch team that I wouldn't say we fear, but we are wary of. We know they can be they would be a very difficult opponent. We don't quite know where we stand, and I think that's why people are not projecting themselves beyond this first game. It's because we arrive the situation with players. I mean, 3 uncapped players who might well play a role in that game. 4 players having retired since the World Cup. Loads of demands placed also on top players within the group because of the very strange calendar we've got. So we don't know where we are. We don't know where we are. We are exactly in the same situation we were in when we arrived in Qatar, where honestly nobody had any idea how good or how bad or how average the French were going to be. We had no idea. We have no points of comparison. And this is very much where we are now. So we're not projecting ourselves to the Irish game. This will come in due course, but for the time being, it's all about the Dutch.
Yeah, and obviously you've been contributing to Irish media over a long period of time as well. So I wonder, from the little tidbits you've heard over time, do you have a perspective on Stephen Kenny's Ireland, or is there much, or even in France, is there much known about any of the players we have currently?
No, honestly, I think people have lost track of Ireland a little bit, and are not really aware of what's been going on. And I think if you were to ask people, even people who are involved in the game, they would say, "Oh, Ireland, they've gone through a few problems, haven't they?" And they would stick at that. They wouldn't go in great detail. I think people are aware of the fact that perhaps Ireland doesn't quite have the same reservoir of players that it used to have, and which we're used to. They will be aware of the problems there have been with the federation, succession of coaches, and so forth. But to be honest, and I'm sorry to say that, it has receded in our perception of European football. So, which, by the way, might play to Ireland's advantage, because people are not expecting them to do much against the French. This French team, again, is in transition. It's the right time to take it on.
Yeah, and another thing I was actually going to ask you about, because it was something that was always talked about with the 1998 team, was this whole idea of them being a unifying force for French society. Obviously, that turned out to be an illusion at the time, I think, from documentaries that have come out and everything that's been spoken about. And I get the sense maybe when those conversations are happening now, people don't talk about the national team in that way anymore, and it's not part of that conversation. Or is that the case, or is it still talked about in that way?
I think anyway the discourse was very much a discourse of people were having abroad, not in France, and I've always maintained that it was a false discourse. I've said it for a very long time, and I'll say it again, because it is based on a completely wrong perspective on what is the history of the French national team, which has always been a multi-ethnic, multinational team, always, since the 1930s, the only European team of this kind. So when people were picking on the fact that, oh, look at that, you've got people coming from all sorts of backgrounds, heritage, and so forth, I would answer, yeah, but it's always been like this for us. Look at the Platini team of the 1980s. Look at it. It's the only European team which has got players of Caribbean, African heritage. Some of them actually born in Africa, like Jean Tigana was born in Mali. West Indian, you carry on, Spanish, Italian, Polish. It's always been like that. And so the debate and the discourse is, for me, something that has been manufactured from outside, because suddenly we win. People are wondering, oh, look at that, they won, and they're like that. Well, we've always been like that. It's like, get used to it, guys. And it's true that that discourse, in fact, in France, there have been some pretty nasty comments about this coming from the extreme right. Let's say it as it is, bemoaning the fact that the French national team seems to have a lot of players, notably of African heritage, even though they're probably born in Paris. And as I actually showed, during the last World Cup, some people came up with that, the photograph of the French national team, and saying, look at where they all come from. And I said, well, there's one thing they have all in common: every single one was born in France. But some people have got a problem realizing the fact that you can be French and black, or French and Muslim, And so I won't get drawn into that, because it really annoys me. because for me, that's actually one of the great strengths of French football, and one of the things that our football can be genuinely proud of is that it has been an integrated team from very, very early on. I said from the 1930s onwards, and we didn't wait until the 1980s to have a black player in our ranks, my English friends.
Yeah, and in regards to the 11 then that will play against Ireland, let's assume that there's no injuries against the Dutch, and in the build up to this international break after this weekend, what 11 would you expect to line out in Dublin?
Wow. Oh, that's a tough one. I think Mike Maignan in goal. Okay. I'm looking at the 23 right now. I think Benjamin Pavard on the right, Saliba and Upamecano, or Konate and Upamecano in the middle, Theo Hernandez on the left, midfield definitely Tchouaméni and Rabiot, with perhaps Griezmann in a fake number 8, and up front it could be, obviously Kylian Mbappe will be there. I would hope Kingsley Coman is there too, and perhaps Kolo Muani on the other flank, because he was absolutely superb in that role. So that's a possibility, but to be honest, at the moment it's very much up in the air, and a lot might depend, in fact, of what happens against the Dutch when we play them in Saint-Denis.
Of course, and I suppose finally, Philippe, are we going to see you in Dublin for on Monday week? You're coming, I presume.
I will not be coming on Monday week because I will have to be traveling elsewhere. I will be following the game, I'm sure, but I will be coming to Dublin very soon in any case.
Oh, good. Okay, fair enough. We'll be looking forward to that, of course. But anyway, Philippe, thanks a million for taking the time. Quite a lot there in that conversation, obviously, to pick through. And I don't know, you've given me a little bit of hope from an Irish perspective, so which is hope is always a dangerous thing, as they say. So we'll see how we get on. But thanks very much.
Okay, my pleasure.
All right, that was football journalist Philippe Auclair on France, and perhaps giving Ireland fans a little bit of hope, given that not all is rosy within the French camp, it seems. But anyway, let's turn our attention to the SSE Electricity League, with action across the men's Premier Division, First Division and Women's Premier. Graham Gartland, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Raf?
Not too bad at all. Actually, before we get on to the domestic action, I want to get your thoughts on Ireland. Obviously, the Latvia game on Wednesday, and then next Monday it's the big one against France. But in terms of how you would use the Latvia game, and then your thoughts on the daunting task that awaits in regards to France, what are your thoughts on it at the moment?
I think you probably use the first 60 minutes to work on stuff that you're going to roll into the France game. The France game is more important than the Latvia game, obviously. So you have to use that to see, can we implement things that we can then bring into the France game. So if it is working on counter-attacks or working on certain things that mightn't come up as much, and it might frustrate the fans that why you let Latvia have some of the ball here, but that's the way it goes. You're preparing for a bigger fish to fry again going into the weekend. So things like that you just ask for sort of understanding and patience from the fans from that point of view, but then work on how you can hurt France or how you can break them down. But can you implement some of that in the Latvia game and build confidence from that and build a bit of momentum? We've seen how important momentum is in sport. So can you build a little bit of that, get minutes into players that probably aren't getting enough minutes, the likes of Nathan Collins, Matt Doherty example, lads that might need a minutes in their legs as well to just get their eye in. So can it be used for that as well? So yeah, I think there has to be a level of understanding around the game as well, but you obviously want to have a positive result to go into the France game.
Yeah, and in regards to both games, obviously Evan Ferguson, and we've talked about him a lot on this podcast, and he was brilliant at the weekend for Brighton against Grimsby in the FA Cup, a couple of goals, especially the first one, the quality of the touch and everything else. But as a defender, if you're looking at it from a France point of view and how Ireland can hurt them, and they won't get a lot of the ball, in terms of who complements Ferguson best in terms of bringing out the best of his game, and also from your experience as a centre half, what you would fear, who do you think should partner him?
If they go with a two front, you probably go with Obafemi, because Evan is really good at holding the ball up and linking the play, and then he's a threat from crosses, but you need to probably somebody that's going to run beyond them. I'm not saying he's not quick, he is, and he can do that role himself, but if Obafemi is running into channels and then you're setting it back for crosses, Evan can mainly plant himself in the box, and he is really good in between the posts as well. He has a good presence about him. Bit like Harry Kane in that way, that he has that presence can hold the ball up, he can bring players into the game, and on top of that, you can finish. You don't really want them running channels and being out in them wide areas. You want them in the middle of the goal and being effective in that sense. So I'll probably go Obafemi from Burnley, who's obviously joined Burnley and done really well. So that's who I'd like to go and see. Whether you go with 2 up front against France in a 3-5-2, I'm not sure. They might play Evan up by himself and play like 2 midfielders in behind them. And if they are going to do that, and he does drop into play, then 2 midfielders need to run beyond, whether it's Jamie McGrath or Jason Knight or Will Smallbone. I always think you need players to stretch the game at certain times to allow your midfielders to play, or to allow, if a centre forward does drop in, he has to be dropping into space. That space is made by players running beyond and deep and in a back line. So if they are going with 2, I'd probably go Obafemi.
Okay, we're going to turn our attentions now obviously to the SSE Electricity League, and in the Premier Division last Thursday the Louth derby took place and Drogheda United lost 1-0 at home to Dundalk. Conor Malley with the goal, and I have to say across the weekend as well there were some brilliant goals scored. I think in most of the fixtures there were a few cracking goals. And then Cork City on Friday night lost 2-0 at home to Shelburne. Shamrock Rovers and St. Pat's, again, Shamrock Rovers still waiting for a win, and they share the points there, 2-2 draw. Other than the penalty, as I said, a lot of cracking goals scored, and Jack Burns is certainly one to watch. Richie Towles was a great finish, and Jake Mulroney's as well. And then Bows beat UCD 2-1, coming from behind with goals from Paddy Kirk and Ali Coote. And then Derry City and Sligo Rovers couldn't be separated, and that was 1-1 draw, with Kieran Call scoring an equaliser from a set piece. Max Mata had scored earlier on, and that's the game we're going to talk about first, because you were on TV duty, Graham, for that one. And the first thing, I suppose, and it's something that was touched on last year, as much as Derry had a brilliant season, their home form is something that probably they would need to improve on if they're really going to push. And we're presuming Shamrock Rovers come back into it at some point, or whether Bows can stay the course, that their home form needs to be upped a little bit. The pitch seems to be a real factor there, and I mean, you got to see it up close.
Yeah, I think it is. I think Rory Higgins won't make excuses for it, because it gives the players the now. But they won 10 games away from home last season. They only won 8 at home. Normally, when you associate Derry, it was always the home form, because it wasn't an easy place to go. We were talking about it off air before the game, that, you know, coming to Derry years ago, you'd have shook hands on a draw straight away, because it was such a tough place to go to get a result. I think teams are giving them a lot of respect. As you've seen that with Sligo, they got a lot of bodies back behind the ball. They worked really hard. They were really well organised. They looked a threat on the counter-attack at times. Hartman, Will Fitzgerald, I thought, had a fantastic game as well. But the pitch doesn't help them. It slows the game down a bit. And you've seen some of the injuries as well that was caused, where I think it was Branner, the right back.
Yeah, Branner Falcon, the Sligo right back. Yeah,
there's just no giving it. These Astros need to be really watered before people play on them, and it's not Derry's fault in that sense. But both them and Dundalk need to get out and water the pitches, so it becomes probably safer for players to play on, and better on the eye for people watching. Derry do need. The best thing about Derry at the moment is they're missing so many vital players, and they're still getting decent results. They're still up at second in the league. When they get the likes of Duffy back, obviously Conley's going to be a miss, but they get Duffy, Donegan, Colin Whelan back as well, who's going to be a big signing for them, because I do think McGonigal needs a bit of help up there. McAniff came on and Brandon Kavanagh came on, and they made a bit of a difference. They were willing to run beyond McGonigal when McGonigal dropped in. Will Patching is a lovely player, and he has moments in the game where you think it's great, but he always wants to come towards the ball. He always wants to be on the ball. He wants the ball to feet. When McAniff came on and Kavanagh came on, they just brought an energy to them that they stretched the back line. They unsettled Sligo's defence and ran beyond them. There was some marvellous skill in the game from Hartman, from Will Fitzgerald, from Will Patching. But there was a bit of lack of end product from Derry. And I think they only had 2 shots on target in the game. And when you're thinking there's a team pushing to win a league title at home, you'd expect them to have a little bit more than that. And I think Rory himself would expect them to have a little bit more than that and show that desire. They were they were in the ascendancy and they scored a goal, and then the ref disallowed it and brought it back because he didn't think there was an advantage. Just as Sligo got a nick on the ball, it bounced to McGonigal. McGonigal finishes, and the ref brings it back and he books John Martin. And I think that just took the wind out of sails a little bit. And Sligo we got away with one there, and they lifted the game from then on, and they were probably the better team going in towards half time. It was only when I'd say McAniff and Brandon Kavanagh came on that Derry looked like they had energy and they could run. Then they score, and then it looks like the whole crowd is getting behind them, and they were pushing for a winner. Albeit Sligo still had the best chance of the second half. Vashduk should score. He's through on goal. Shane McElhenney pulls up, doesn't realise he has as much time, and he drags the shot wide.
Yeah, actually, because I had actually noted that moment where Adriano Real sort of stopped the play. Well, I mean, the play went on, but then he brought it back, and Alan Cawley on the commentary wasn't too happy with the way that was handled. Obviously, he would have thought that, you know, the play should have been allowed to go on, you know, and an advantage should have been run. Like, what did you make of that overall situation in terms of?
He originally played advantage, Raf, because the tackle happens and it goes out to McGonigal. As McGonigal tries to take his touch beyond Pinacker, Pinacker gets a nick, and as soon as Pinacker nicks the ball, the ref blows his whistle, but he doesn't let the second bit play out because he nicks it onto McGonigal, and it puts it into McGonigal's path for the better shot. And if he just waits, but because it nicks off Pinacker, he blows the whistle and thinks, oh well, that's the advantage gone. McGonigal gets the finish, and as he's pulling the trigger, the whistle's been blown and Pinacker stops. But I think if he just had to let it go for an extra second, I think it's a goal for Derry, and it's a really good refereeing decision, and everybody's praising him for playing advantage. And like I said, that just changed the trajectory of the game a little bit, and it just gave Sligo that feeling of, oh, we've survived one there, we got away with one, and then also Derry just went, oh, it probably hit them a little bit harder. Matton then subsequently makes a handball on the halfway line. They're looking for it. He gets taken off at half time. Because I think John Russell probably would have been sent off.
Yeah, let's listen to John Russell actually, because he was speaking to. No, you're very good at these segues. But anyway, John Russell, Sligo Rovers manager, was speaking afterwards to RT Sports. So let's have a listen to that.
Congratulations, well-deserved point. It was a bit of a smash and grab to begin with, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, I felt we played well tonight. We knew it was going to be difficult coming up here. We weathered the storm first 15-20 minutes, and then we scored an outstanding goal, and that's what we're capable of, and we've shown that this season. And then second half we had to dig deep. A lot of players came off injured. We had to change 2 right backs, so we'll have to assess them. A few tired bodies towards the end, and then we conceded from a set play. But for me, with the best chance of the game then when Bogdan went through, and if he finishes that, you probably hold out and get 3 points. But it's a good thing to be coming away here disappointed after a draw.
Hold on.
Cheers, thank you.
Right, so that is Sligo Rovers manager John Russell speaking to RT soccer correspondent Tony O'Donoghue after the game. And just on Sligo, actually, before we move on, you know, they've shown resilience a couple of times this season now, because they were, of course, down to 10 men for about 70 minutes, and actually coincidentally John Mann, who was sent off that day, and they managed to beat Pats. And it's hard to put a finger on what their season is going to look like. There's a sense they're going to be in that mid-table, but do you see potential there for them to push on into that sort of top 4 mix?
I think the likes of Hartman and Will Fitzgerald are exciting for them, and I think Mata gives them a presence in the front line. The defence, when they get back and respect teams and they give teams the due in terms of, they went to Derry and they set out the stall that they were going to catch them on the counter-attack and play. He looked really hard to beat and difficult to break down. The issue I seen even going into the game against them, when they tried to play an open game against Cork, they probably got caught out and they were 2-0 down to Cork. But again, they showed a lot of resilience, a lot of togetherness to come back against Cork and get a 2-2 draw. So it's all down to their approach to the game. Are they going to be a team that sits in and defends and becomes difficult to beat, and then hopefully their front 3 players of Fitzgerald, Hartman and Mata get them goals and nick them? Or are they going to try and dominate possession of the ball? You have to respect every opposition, but it seems to me that they're probably better suited to being a counter-attacking team at this moment in time. In fairness, they probably were easy to play against under the previous manager. I watched them play a few times, and I thought they basically just went out and said, right, we're going to have the ball, and then you have the ball, and became a free-flowing game. But when you come up against teams that have better quality, you end up losing them games. I think John Russell's been a bit more pragmatic about it, because obviously he was there under Liam Buckley as well, and said, you know what, let's make ourselves a little bit more difficult to beat at times, get bodies behind the ball. Greg Bulger was fantastic at that on Friday night, made sure that everybody got behind the ball, done their job. Like he said, Will Fitzgerald ends up at right back. Morahan was in there for a while as well. They went through it. Carl O'Sullivan came on, and every one of them done their job for the team, and there was a real togetherness about them. And in fairness, they deserved the draw on the day. So fair play to John Russell. He's installed a bit of steel, a bit of energy to them as well, a bit of togetherness, and it's invariably it's getting them good results.
Yeah, and Shamrock Rovers, as I said, still waiting for first win of the season. Now they've only been beaten the once against Derry City in what was a really good game. Now the 2-2 draw with Pats, the disappointment for them will be they conceded another late equaliser, albeit the earlier late equalisers they conceded were when they were either down a man or down two players after sending off earlier in the season. We're a sixth of the way into the season now. At what point does it become a little bit of a concern from Stephen Bradley's point of view in terms of maybe he looking at making tweaks to maybe the system, or not so much personnel at this stage of the season, but maybe making significant tweaks to just try and unlock it? Or is patience the key in this situation?
Yeah, like I said to you, I think if teams were pulling away and playing unbelievably well, I think it'd be more of a worry. I think Stevens looked at the performances and said, right, there's elements of all the performances that have been good. He touched on it not being ruthless enough against Drogheda. He touched on the decision making at times in certain games, but again, the performances have been good. The sole defeat came against Derry, which was probably the best performance. So it's just been sort of unpredictable season for Rovers, because you're so used to when they go 1-0 up, they just strangle teams. The fact that teams are coming back against them is something that Stephen probably has to look at. But like you said, nobody's really pulling away. Derry aren't pulling up trees neither, and that would be the worry if a team was pulling away, that you think, right, the performances aren't good, we're not getting the results on top of that. The performances have been good. They've got quality players who have experience. And like you said, I said this, I think the first time we done this about a month ago, Raf. Everybody's so quick to judge teams at this point of the season, good and bad. But the league doesn't settle down for 10 games. And then you see all the suspensions, and you see all the injuries kick in, and you see players who the first 5 games, they're all flying because they've had a good pre-season behind them, they're eating right. Let's see the ones who are doing that 15 games in and 20 games in. And that's where the professionalism of the players and the top teams will come through, because they generally look after themselves. But it'd be interesting to see how it goes. I think the disappointing thing for Stephen would be that they're giving up leads, which is not something that they do. But there's an intensity to them when the game draws level that I think he'd probably be looking for when they're winning the games, to make sure that they just see them out and really strangle teams and stand on their throat when they're in winning positions. But you know what? For all you can be critical of Rovers from that point of view, every other team now is having a go, because they know what's at stake, and they know what like you said, they know what Rovers are trying to achieve, and most teams are going all out to stop that, and that's something that you just have to deal with, and that's the way football is at times, you know.
Yeah, and then on the other side of the equation, of course, Pats as well, under pressure after 3 defeats in a row, and especially the damaging one at Dundalk, and also in a way where they lost up in Sligo with a man advantage for 70 minutes. This was a huge result for them, because there was a lot of pressure being piled on Tim Clancy.
Yeah, there was a lot of talk, there was a lot of unrest around it, just the different murmurings. But in fairness, like, for the team to come back at Tala after going 2-1 down with such a good goal from Jack Bourne, it shows that there is a bit of togetherness in the team, and it's a wonderful finish from Mulroney. He competes for the header with Gannon first, and Gannon drops back into a wing back position, but Mulroney just stays in that inside left position, and he's in between, I think it's Dan Cleary and Gannon, and neither know who to go with. The left wing back is coming onto the scene, but then Mulroney finds himself in that little pocket. I think Gary O'Neill is the one that's trying to get over to stop him, and he bends a lovely shot into the far corner. It dips right at the post, and it's a brilliant finish. And Mulroney's a player that's going to have to step up for Pats this year. Like, I would have seen him over in Scotland. He was at Inverness and then he went to Hearts before going to America. And he has bags of potential. It's just about delivering on that and becoming a big player for St. Pat's.
Yeah, and you watched the Louth derby as well on the Thursday. Dundalk. I think it seems like Drogheda had the better of the game, but like Dundalk seem to be picking up a nice bit of momentum now. They're not winning all the time, but they're chipping away at points in a way that Drogheda has been doing as well.
Yeah, I think Drogheda, especially second half, I think Drogheda were probably a better team. You get galvanised again, you go a goal down, and there's a big push, especially up in. I still call it United Park. I don't know what's the name of it now.
Weavers Park now.
Weavers Park. There you go. Thanks. That's what you're doing, the presenting job. And it's a really good goal. I think the winger for Dundalk does really well. Checks inside, and he looks dangerous. Really quick feet. And O'Malley just opens up his body and bends into the far corner. I think Drogheda would be disappointed because they had chances at the end, and obviously the penalty is a big one. Draper steps up. He's only a young boy. And he just opens up his body and tries to place in the far corner. Keeper makes a good save, but I think that'd be disappointing. Is that for all the pressure Drogheda have, they didn't score on the night. It was a really well contested game. Probably wasn't, a great game of football. Wasn't one for the purists, but Drogheda sort of made a bit of a battle, and they were able to run and get energy up. And Draper holds the ball up well. And they get a lot of bodies around them. Then Marty is very good. He does really well to get the penalty. I just think they'd be disappointed they didn't get something out of the game because they deserve something out of the game.
Yeah, whereas Shelburne did get something out of the game down in Cork, and it's interesting looking at their defensive record. They have the joint best defensive record at this stage. Only 3 conceded. With Derry, and then Cork, in contrast, have scored 7 more goals than Shells, but have conceded 12. So it probably was telling in the game. Shells and Damien Duff's Shells just seem really organised.
Yeah, they're really pragmatic. I think they've missed Boyd because, and I think looking at what Damien's done, he's made them really hard to beat, really hard to break down. They probably lack a cutting edge at the moment in the forward play with Boyd not being available, and that's just purely down to injuries. Would he like to bring in reinforcements in that area? Probably. He's never going to come out and say it. Evan Caffrey's gone up there, who's played all last year as a midfielder for UCD, so he's never going to come out and say it because that's the way it is. You work with you play with the hand you're given, really. Sorry, it took a while to get that out, but I think that's what he's doing, and he's made them really pragmatic and difficult to beat. And if you are that way, you'll always get chances in the game, especially like you said with Cork's maybe defensive record. The first goal, Cork just don't get out of the box quick enough. The ball goes back. They just don't get out of the box quick enough, and ends up being a glancing header from their own centre back that goes in. Second goal's a really well worked goal from Shell's point of view, and Moylan, is in the box and has a bit of cutting edge to him, gets a really good finish. But again, probably not enough pressure from a Cork point of view that Colin Healy might be a bit upset with. But they're grinding out results. They're staying in games as long as they can. And when they do get Boyd back, or if they do manage to bring in an extra striker or someone at the top end of the pitch come the summer, they're in a really good position then because they're building off a really strong base.
Yeah, and then at the moment as well, Bohemians are top of the table, 5 wins from 6, so they're on 15 points, 3 ahead of Derry City. Now, they had to grind out a result against UCD, had to come from behind a couple of goals in the second half. But one of the players that is getting plaudits from the start of the season, James McManus, he's done quite well. Like, what have you made of him and like his role really in that midfield?
Really good. He keeps them moving. He allows Coote to get on the ball and drive forward. He does brilliantly well for the second goal. I watched the back and the ball. UCD cleared it down to the middle of the pitch, and he probably, for such a young player to take a touch on it, but he obviously knows where his next pass is straight away. He kills it dead and he knocks it out the Kirk. Kirk plays in Daft Labby, and that allows Coote to just run around the front of him, and Coote ends up with a brilliant goal, drags her onto his left foot. The biggest praise I can give Bohs here is everything went against them in this game in the first half. They had a missed penalty, missed by a good bit. Even I was thinking with my penalty record, that's a terrible penalty.
I think it looked like it left the ground. I don't know exactly what. Oh yeah,
yeah. Wall behind it, yeah.
Oh yeah.
So it was but and then you have a goal disallowed that looks a little bit harsh as well. That it doesn't look like the ball's going to outplay. So everything that went against them, and I think that would have maybe hurt them a little bit more last season than it did this season. You can see that a lot of goals the last 20 minutes of the games last season from winning positions. They lost a lot of games last year, even though they were taking the lead early. This was the opposite. They're 1-0 down to a really good goal from Bishop from UCD, but they rallied really well. Kirk scores a great goal, cuts in on his right foot, and then Cute steps up. But McManus, again, just allows the forward players to go and attack, and he gives them that security, but he also gives them that freedom of play, that they know that he's going to be in a position that the fullbacks can play through him. He can link the midfielders he can link the defence to the strikers, and he can link the wide players to the wide players, so everything can run through him. And his game intelligence is really high, so you can tell that, you know, that position just suits him, and he allows Ali Coote to then go and get involved in the attacking sense of the game.
Yeah, and then in the first division, Finn Harps got their first win of the season, winning 1-0 at Longford Town. Waterford drew 2-2 with Bray Wanderers. Athlone and Treaty United, exact same result. And that was on the Friday night. The first two games, of course, were on the Saturday. And then Wexford beat Kerry FC 2-1. So Kerry keep being able to find the net now. It's just now trying to. They have had 1 point, but trying to actually get a first win now is the target. And then in the sort of one at the top of the table, Galway United won 2-0 at Cove Ramblers. 5 wins from 5 for Galway, and it looks like well the gap is 7 points to Waterford. The way they've started, you know, it's been brilliant for Galway, but they will probably be mindful of what petered out in the middle of last season. So it's kind of learning from that, being able to maintain that momentum.
Yeah, exactly. Momentum is a massive thing, but when it does get tough, knowing when to dig in and grind out results. Most people think you win leagues by this free-flowing football, and it's that, but it's the moments when it gets tough and you look around and you dig in. You might dig out a draw might be 1-0 down 5 minutes to go, and you dig out a draw, and you know, it brings this feeling of, right, we got away with one here, let's make sure it doesn't happen again. So it just gathers and gathers, and you build a togetherness through them difficult moments. It's easy to play when everything's going well and everything's flying, but when you look around and you see who's which in the difficult moments, that's what galvanizes the team. And if they went through that last year and know how to navigate it better this year, it should be telling. Again, the other teams around them aren't exactly setting the world alight either, so it's on Galway to go out and just build up this unsurmountable lead. And take the heart out of the other teams around them to go, well, looks like we're just playing for second in a playoff spot. And it's in Galway's hands to do that. They're the probably biggest budget in the first division. Waterford will be disappointed. I think they're 2-0 up and then get a player sent off, and then it goes back to 2-2. So again, from a winning position, they lose, and it's great for Bray to come back into it, but I think they'd be disappointed in losing a player and then losing the 2 goals.
Yeah, and then in the women's Premier Division, Athlone Town had a bye week last week, but they had lost their opening round game, but they went to Treaty United and won 8-0. So really, the season really is up and running for them now. Peamount won 4-0 at Sligo. DLR Waves beat Cork City 3-0. And then Sarah Rowe scored her first goal of the season for Bohemians with a 1-0 victory at Galway United, and also it was a goal where it was capitalising on an errant back pass and then finishing well. And then Shelburne and Shamrock Rovers. Now this was the big one. There was a lot of focus on Shells as the reigning double champions, Shamrock Rovers as the sort of the new kids on the block, coming back into the league after 10 years and having signed a number of high-profile players. One of those, Anya O'Gorman, scored to give Shamrock Rovers the lead, but Jess Stapleton then levelled from a set piece heading in at the far post. And Tony O'Donoghue was at Shelburne versus Shamrock Rovers, and he was chatting to the Shamrock Rovers manager, Collie O'Neill, who believes his side is only at about 65% of where they're looking to be.
Interview with Shamrock Rovers manager Collie O'Neill after a thrilling draw, I'd have to say. Would you think it was a fair result in the end?
Probably in the end, yeah, probably was a fair result. We probably started off the better, and then I suppose towards the end they had a couple of chances. So yeah, we'll say it was a fair result overall.
There was a big roar at the end when Noel Murray had the ball over the line. Did you think it was offside?
I actually, from the corner of my eye, I saw the flag going up straight away. So I knew, even before she put it in, I saw the flag up. So it was calm. It was okay.
What was it like getting ready for this game? Because there was a lot of build-up about it. Obviously, you've had to bring together a new team. Many of them, 6 of them started actually, that came from Shelburne. Was that a factor coming into it?
No, we're trying to actually remove that from their heads. we were just going to say it's still a pitch with white lines, with a referee, with 11 against 11. Don't play the occasion. We just play the game, and that's all we focused on. We did our work for this game like we would any other game. We didn't treat it any differently.
How impressed were you with Jamie Thompson? I mean, she came off the bench last week and got 3, set up the goal today for Anya O'Gorman, and she had a player of the match performance.
Yeah, she's been brilliant. I know an awful lot of people have been talking and highlighting of all the players that we signed from other clubs, but what Shamrock Rovers have produced internally between Jamie, you have Ola O'Matney, you had Abby Tootle, we have Maria Reynolds, they've been top class. And they've gone under the radar, but they're really, really good players. And even when you look at their age profile, they haven't even reached their best yet. They're really, really good young players.
Psychologically, this is probably an important blow. It's very early in the season, I get that, and Shelbourne are as likely to go to Tala and get something. But yet, you proved today that you're equal to the task of competing with the league and cup champions.
Yeah, and even with that, we're disappointed probably in patches of how we actually played. We're probably only at 65% of where we really want to be at. Like those patches there where we were really, really good, and then there was patches where we weren't so good. So yeah, there's a lot of improvement to go on for us.
That is Tony O'Donoghue speaking to Collie O'Neill after Shelbourne and Shamrock Rovers drew 1-1 in the Women's Premier Division. And Champions League now. The draw was live on the RT News channel at 11 o'clock last Friday. And it's very interesting when you look at it now. On one side of the draw of the quarterfinals, Real Madrid play Chelsea, a repeat of last season's quarters, and Man City against Bayern Munich. So Pep Guardiola going to be taking on one of his former clubs. And then the other side of the draw is very interesting. AC Milan taking on Napoli, and then Inter Milan against Benfica. And Graham, just looking at that, I think when we talk about sides of the draw and what a potential final will look like, there's going to be a surprise finalist one way or the other now.
Yeah, I think a surprise in terms of like coming out of the Italian league. There hasn't been many teams that have done it in the last few years. Obviously, it's been dominated by the Spanish teams, the English teams, and Bayern. But they have like a powerhouse like Milan, who have a fantastic Champions League record, and Inter, who will probably be a bit more successful domestically in Italy than AC would have been. But AC Milan have this pedigree in Europe that is different to Inter Milan's. Maybe goes back to the fact that we grew up on AC Milan in the 90s with Hulla van Basten, Rijkaard, and Maldini and Baresi, where Inter would have been more dominant in the 60s, I think. But domestically, Inter would have a lot more. But Napoli are the new kids on the block.
And they're going to win Serie A. I think that's just done and dusted anyway.
So they're going to win Serie A. So Milan will be thinking, right, we're up against the Serie A champions. They play a fantastic brand of football, free-flowing. Somebody touched on it. It was anti-positional. I read a piece in the paper that they worked their system off an anti-positional play where they go and get bodies around the ball, and that's the way they play rather than taking up spaces. And Benfica, who constantly lose their best players, when you consider Enzo signs for Chelsea, Nunes signs for Liverpool, and yet they're still in this level of the Champions League. It's fantastic, and it just shows all the work that goes into the academy system that they have, that they constantly produce young players.
Yeah, and I think similar to Inter as well. They have a huge pedigree in the 60s as well. You go back to Eusebio and those. Like, they're a massive club, like in European standards. Obviously, with the Portuguese league not really being in a position to compete, as you mentioned, they always just lose their best players.
Yeah, and like we would base a lot of the stuff they do in their academy is interesting for us, and in terms of looking at how they get players through the system. And they're fantastic, and the number one academy probably in Europe in terms of financially gaining from the sell-ons from their youth products. So that they've brought in the most finances through that. So again, they'll feel like they're in a game against Inter. They can push on and try and get into a semi-final. Napoli will feel their favourites going into Milan, like you said, after being champions of Scudetto. I don't think anybody wants to draw Napoli in this. Like I could see Napoli going all the way to the final, and then again, Real lost to Barcelona last night, 2-1 from a late goal. But for some reason, they just perform in Europe. They just have this thing where they just constantly talk about powerhouse in Europe. They just constantly outperform wherever form they're in the league. You just turn up. And I think they'll get the better of Chelsea over it. City, Bayern, I think you fancy City. I think it's going to go down to a Real Man City semi-final here.
And if it did become a Real City semi-final, are you kind of leaning more towards Real then to take one of the places in the final?
I think if City don't probably overcomplicate it. And I know that's
Guardiola just seems to do that by nature. At some point in the competition, he will do that.
I just like, again, yeah, and that's how, like, as a coach as well, even to say that, I feel a little bit like, yeah, it doesn't sit well with me saying it because of how good he is. But when you have somebody like Haaland who's just got his second hat-trick in the space of 2 games, like how Madrid handle him. But if you play to his strengths and free him up, I can't see them maybe handling him. And if they can do that, I think they probably get the better of Madrid. You seen the first 30 minutes with Liverpool, the intensity they played at. But Vinicius Jr. is fantastic and he caused trouble, and Benzema causes trouble. And Modric has this way of controlling games and getting, even through the bad times when they're struggling, he's willing to go on the ball. He has such bravery, and it's a football bravery to go on the ball in tight spaces and get his team playing and relax them and control the tempo and get them up the pitch or slow the game down when he needs it. His football intelligence is through the roof. So that would be a really interesting one. But I can see Napoli making it all the way to the final, and whether they play City or Real. Every time you write Real Madrid off, you keep coming back. So I don't really want to do it now.
Yeah, they don't even need to have one of their like classic teams to get to a final and win it. I would say the one that won it last year probably it wouldn't. You know, they've had better teams win the Champions League and have had better teams lose it as well.
And Real and Chelsea felt they should have knocked them out. They had enough chances to win the game. And City were the same. They felt they should have knocked them out. They had enough chances to win the game. And we just seen some spectacular goals or comebacks from them where they're never beaten. And to write them off again, I'd be a fool. And so that's why I just say we'll see how that one goes, Raf.
Yeah, I'd say write them in now, and they will, and then that's how they let us down. Then, but anyway, that's it for this week's podcast. Remember, Wednesday the Latvia match is live on RT2 and the RT Player from 7 p.m. It's also live on RT Radio 1 Extra, and it'll be a live blog on rte.ie/sport. And then France next Monday, also on RT2 and RT Player, with coverage from 7. It's on Radio 2, but on that Monday, it's going to be on 2FM's Game On. And then we'll also have the live blog on rte.ie/sport. We'll be back next Tuesday rather than Monday, as we'll be reacting to France versus Ireland and the international break as a whole the morning after the night before. And hopefully we'll be talking about a positive Ireland result as well. So thanks to Stephen Elliott and Philippe Auclair, who joined us earlier on, and also to you, Graham, and best of luck.
Pleasure, Raf. Thank you.